Right. Okay. Good evening. Welcome to Axiom Flux, Season 5, Episode 2. May's Last Stand. Theresa May. So there we are. It's all about this leave. It's called Leave, not Brexit. However, I brought a Brexit up. Anyway, we're going to have an open mic type chat about it all. Hopefully, there's a few more people in here tonight that knows more of the ins and outs of it all than myself, because I'm not kept up with it that much, so I'm guilty for not keeping up with these things. But there we are. Hopefully a few guys will give you their thoughts on it all. Me, myself, well, political atheist, so do I have an opinion? I guess I do. Does it matter? I guess not, as I'm a political atheist. But anyway, moving on, I'll say good evening to Geoff. You there, Geoff? How's it going?
No, I'm not here, man. I'm just a figment of your imagination.
Okay, Cheech. Good evening, Paul.
Howdy doody.
All right.
Yeah, thank you, me old mucker. Yeah, I think I'm getting there.
Good.
Wherever there is.
Yeah, we got William of Plonk. Hello, Bill. All right.
Shouldn't that be William of Orange?
He's gone all night shy now. Anyway, he'll be back in a minute. He's on mute at the moment. And also we have PJ, the engineer. Are you with PJ or are you still engineering? Must be engineering.
What he's taking.
All right. Well, listen, look, let's make a start and have a chat about this and let's see what we can come up with, make any sense of it all, if there's any sense to be made out of it. We all know it's an agenda. It's a continuous of the entrapment of people in this European Union that was started many decades ago, and I would argue many centuries ago, but that's another story. But it's worth a conversation. That's why we're talking about it tonight. I think I'll go over to Geoff first of all to see what you can tell us about it, Geoff. What do you feel about it, if at all anything? And
Well,
is there anything that can be done about it? Whatever. Go on.
Well, most of us know now that we've had the great British Brexit betrayal that's happened, and we've got a sort of deal that's been passed through the cabinet. I think. I don't know. Has it been passed through the cabinet? I'm not sure. But anyway, we know that the powers that be throughout this hell forbidden planet want this new one world government in place by 2030, and of course that wouldn't be able to happen if we had Brexit. So they're never going to allow Brexit to happen, as far as I'm aware, because if they did, the EU would probably collapse and their plans for their one world government would go. So I got a feeling they're just going to keep us in no matter what. There's a lot of money. There's probably a lot of money from the EU flying around in bribes. That's the way I perceive it. So I think probably Theresa May and her cronies have probably taken lots of nice big bribes from the EU. And, we're all paid for, of course, by the taxpayer. So we paid for our own one world government unknowingly, unwittingly. That's what I think. I don't think they want to let us have what we want, because if they did, they wouldn't be able to return us to slavery. Even Rees-Mogg himself said that this is going to be a slave state. I don't know if you've seen that, where he said this is going to be a slave state. The way the Brexit deal, if this Brexit deal goes through, I wanted a no deal, which is to go over to basically, it is a deal, but is on World Trade Organization, Canada style, a WTO deal, which would have allowed us to be able to trade freely through the rest of the world.
We have to have any deals. That's the point, Jeff. All we had to do was.
What would happen, though, Paul, is that if we left with what they call a no deal, we would actually revert to WTO rules, which is as a type of trade deal in itself, but it's less restrictive, less regulations, tariffs are less and all that, and we wouldn't be sort of stuck in this stupid common rule book and this like customs union thing that they're trying to put us back in. So what they've done effectively is taken us out of the EU through the front door and taken us back in through the back door, if you like. It's a bit of a stitch up, to say the least, in my opinion. But there you have it. That's my thoughts on it anyway. And I think, they're going to have this one world government no matter what. But I can't see them. Apparently, you've got to vote. You've got to have so many votes of no confidence. I think it's something like 42 or 46 or something. And I don't think they've had enough votes to chuck Theresa May out, which is the only other thing that could work to get rid of May, as far as I'm aware, is for Arlene to pull the plug on them. Because everybody's saying, come on, Arlene. She's the leader of the DUP. Because the Tories are in a coalition government. Of course, because it's a coalition government, Arlene could shut them down. As far as I'm aware, she could be our last hope to shut this government down. And call for that would call a snap election, but then of course you'd probably end up with Mr. Corbyn in, and where that would go, I don't know, but I wouldn't imagine that would be much better for us as far as Brexit's concerned. So,
well, what I've got here, I mean, unless somebody's got the white paper that's been released, or whether it's altered, but I've got here the PDF of the white paper. Which was issued in late July, and it's. I'm not going to read it all. I'll just read a couple of things. Perhaps one or two of you guys can tell me whether it's different from what they said here. I mean, they don't give a lot of clues away about what exactly is being, sacrificed either way, or whatever which way you want to get. But it's the future relationship between the United Kingdom and the European paper, July 2018. Now, I'm supposing that this is the thing that the cabinet signed off on the other day, and it said it blah blah blah. It will preserve the UK's and EU's frictionless access to each other's markets for goods, protecting jobs, livelihoods on both sides, and propose new arrangements for services. And this is what she said the other day. It would meet our shared commitments to Northern Ireland and Ireland through the overall future relationship in a way that respects the EU's autonomy without harming the UK's constitutional and economic integrity. My word, it mentioned constitution. It would end free movement, taking back control of the UK borders. It would see the UK step out into the world, driving forward an independent trade policy by striking trade deals with new friends and old allies. It would maintain the shared security capabilities that keep citizens in the UK and the EU safe as we work in the partnership with member states to tackle crime and terrorism. It would end vast annual contributions to the EU budget, releasing funds for domestic priorities, in particular our long-term plan for the NHS. It would take us out of the common agriculture policy and the common fisheries policy, ensuring we can better meet the needs of farming and fishing communities. It would maintain our current high standards on consumer and employment rights and the environment. And it would enable cooperation to continue in areas including science and international development, improving people's lives within and beyond Europe's borders. In short, the proposal set out in this white paper would honour the result of the referendum. It would deliver a principled and practical Brexit that is in our national interest and in the UK's and the EU's mutual interest. So together, we must now get on and deliver it, securing the prosperity and the security of our citizens for generations to come. Now, That's Prime Minister Right Honourable Theresa May. Now, there's 4 and there's loads more. I'm not going to read anymore. But I think that's just what she said the other day, actually, to be honest. And she said in that place in London. So, has anybody? Is this the white paper that got approved, or is there anything been changed in any of it, or is this? I did hear Bill say something about there's 2 white papers. Were you referring to the 1972 European statute bill, or were you referring to this white paper that's been put forward for the New Deal for Europe regarding the Brexit bill? Are you there?
Yeah, well, right. I mean, before we even got this far, there was a white paper asked to be put down for the said people, because we didn't even have a parliament. We weren't echo whisking in parliament at all, were we? With cameras or nothing. And I don't recall how I ever voted myself, but shows you I was young and green, like you are. And I read up on it, and it said if people had seen this white paper that's come out in 71, the year before, that they would never have voted for staying in or going into this not trade, but it was what do they call it now back in 71. It seems fair enough to go in for that only, but it's morphed into a lot more as it's gone by, which is the long-term plan. Anyways, I mean, I listen to Parliament all day long if there's something comes up on the listings early doors, for the Brexit. And there was a big hue and cry because they was discussing something about the Brexit, and they didn't have they can't discuss it until they show the white paper, or this draft white paper. And apparently then nobody brought it into the Commons on that day. So there was a pandemonium, because the speaker jumped old Burko and started rattling and prattling off. Oh yes, of course. I'm sure as a Speaker of the House, you'd have known that it had to be there and actually show them a copy that they could know to talk about what they're talking about. Anyways, it disappeared, and it got talked about with it pending to come, or somebody come in with some papers, and it carried on. Well, it come to light that there was 2 papers floating. That's the Brexit now, but back in 82, the same thing happened, and it was signed off behind closed doors before it was agreed on by the public, which is the same thing which Theresa May, we had Merkel come over and see her a few weeks ago. I only just caught the sight of her on the Parliament channel, seeing her walking into number 10. And of course, she was great friends with Cameron on the boat, discussing rowing in the river, you know what I mean? But there's been 2, and there was 2 in, and the wrong one got signed off on, but it was the right one as far as the people was concerned, and that's the same thing here. But that backstop's going to trip us up. The 7-page part of this 500-page thing is about after 2021. And it is because don't forget, you go into a trading, like Canada said it took 11 years. Well, it's going to take us 7 years at least, slightly less. But once we start that, you can never get out.
Yeah, I think I read something somewhere. I don't know much about this Irish backstop, but apparently what they're doing is the EU are using it to keep us locked inside the EU.
Yeah, indefinitely. Yeah.
Apparently is indefinite. So what they do is lock us in for a certain amount of time and then extend it, and then just keep extending it till the year dot.
Yeah, we've been totally hoodwinked here. I mean, all we had to do after we had the referendum was evoke the 1972 Communities Act.
Yeah.
And we would have been out within a month. All this shenanigans that's going on about deal, no deal, has been a load of rubbish so they can still keep on locking us into the EU military unification.
Yeah.
Well, they did.
And a country that has not got its own army is not a country, because it can't protect its borders.
Paul, what you said about withdrawing via the 1972 Communities Act, technically we've already done that, because we did Article 50 about 9 months after the vote. And
but Article 50 was a load of rubbish. There was no need for it. Straight from the go, they should have done the 1972 Communities Act, and we would have been out.
Yeah, but then they did the withdrawal agreement, and the withdrawal agreement contained the 1972 Communities Act. So they have signed off on the 1972 Community Act. But what they're doing is, we're going to get Brexit, we're going to leave the EU, and then go over to a common rule book. And that common rule book effectively keeps us in the single market with a different customs union.
Yeah. But we're also under a PESCO agreement, which is a permanent structured cooperation, basically exactly the same as we are now.
Yeah, military unification, that's right.
And the trouble is, once they take our military, which they've more or less got big swathes of it already gone over to the EU, and it's a single point command. And who's the single point command? Brussels.
I think, as far as I'm aware, that gets signed off on and ratified on December the 14th, the PESCO thing. So we've got till December the 14th to pull out of that, if we're going to pull out of it after that.
But we've been totally hoodwinked. Not even the members of Parliament know what's going on. Only the Cabinet knows what's going on. The members of Parliament don't know what's going on. And so the only way to find out is to actually go over to the EU itself and read the paperwork from their side. They've not been given the correct information or anything. Plus, the MPs have been told to keep quiet. The media's been told to keep quiet, and nobody hears anything on it. This is total treason. Literally, people, this is total treason.
It's high treason, actually, as far as I'm aware. It's high treason when you
high treason.
When you hand yourself over to a foreign power, because in the Constitution it says, and I'm paraphrasing here because I don't remember it word for word, but it's something like, no foreign prince, prelate, state, potentate have or ought to have any preeminent power, jurisdiction over this realm.
Yes, they're actually breaking the law by saying they can do it. When they
it goes back further than that. It goes back to Henry II's preliminary, which actually underpins the English, the Declaration of Rights and the English Bill of Rights, underpins way back even before Henry VIII's law about praemunire, which means exactly the same as what was written. So this goes back a long, long way. It goes back to the 13th, 14th century. And of course,
it does not matter how much Parliament say that they're suffering.
That's right.
They still can't do it.
No, that's right. I've got something here that I think he's the only guy to mention our Anglo-Saxon culture and past, pre all of the Parliament days and the Norman conquest, which I point at as the whole destruction of being English started 1,000 years ago, and a vassal state we became of the Vatican through the conquest, through the mercenaries, the Norman mercenaries, who conquered England for the Pope at that time, Alexander II, because he gave him a paper ball ring and the cross on the flag, which people think's called St. George Cross, which is just a load of old baloney. But there you go. That's the history, but people don't know much about that. So the only guy
overload all over again.
Yeah, well, the only guy I think I can give any credence to at all as regards politicians, as I'm a political atheist, is a guy called Jacob Rees-Mogg. And the fact is that on his first day speech into Parliament after he's elected as a politician, he mentions Alfred the Great and the common law and what it was. Well, it really is about being English, but he's one of the very few that actually. So I give him a bit of credit for that. But he says here in a Metro article, which was done 5 days ago, this is Jacob Rees-Mogg says UK will turn into a slave state with the Brexit agreement, a vassal state yet again. Basically, Jacob Rees-Mogg says Theresa May has surrendered to the European Union and that the UK will turn into a slave state with the Brexit agreement. The MP's comments come after government sources confirmed the Brexit deal has been agreed on technical level, which we know now got passed by the Cabinet and will be examined at a Cabinet meeting. This is pre that 5 days ago. Speaking to Sky News, Rees-Mogg said she hasn't so much struck a deal as surrendered to Brussels and given in to everything they want and tried to frustrate Brexit. That is not so much a vassal state anymore as a slave state.
Yeah.
You know, this is it. He said, he continued, if the text is as we think, and it's interesting that it has been leaked to the Irish media first and not given to the British media, if that is correct, it should be rejected. Why? Because it could potentially keep up in a customs union indefinitely with no ability to leave. It would divide up the United Kingdom by having separate rules in Northern Ireland, and it would mean we would be paying £39 billion without knowing what we are paying it for. Rees-Mogg added, this doesn't seem to me to be delivering on the Prime Minister's very clear promises. The draft agreement is thought to involve a customs union remaining between the UK and the EU, with some special arrangements in Northern Ireland to prevent a border with the Republic being necessary. The Prime Minister will need to win the support of ministers at the special meeting tomorrow, which she did. Negotiations have not concluded, blah, blah, blah. But this marks a significant step forward in talks. However, problems are already developing for May over the potential Brexit deal, with the former Secretary Boris Johnson describing it as a catastrophe, and they urged ex-cabinet colleagues to chuck it out. He said this is just as bad as it could possibly be. You've got the UK remaining in the customs union, so we can't do trade deals or take control of our laws. We will accept EU laws, but be unable to shape them. The kicker is that we haven't even managed to protect the union between the UK and Northern Ireland because there will have to be custom checks along the Irish Sea. The Cabinet should man up and woman up and chuck it out. There's no question it's a catastrophe. There is no point leaving the EU if you end up being run by the EU. Writing on Twitter, Conservative MP Jonathan Jandongli asked, how come all these Brexiteers are throwing their toys out of the pram before we know the deal terms? Could it be that they always intended us to jump naked off the cliff, whatever the terms? A series of ministers have been said. So, you know, this is basically, treasonism. It's worse than treason.
Treason. The ministers know what's going on, and as for the PESCO, which is the permanent, the structured cooperation, which basically means to cooperate with everything they say. But it's not just that. Once we're in the military, EU military unification, and they get their own treasury, which they're pushing for, they can tax us whatever they like.
Yes, that's not even being mentioned, you know. I've not heard that mentioned.
And the other thing that beats me and gets to me is the fact you can hear Theresa May keep on about it, and some of the other ministers, they're on about the international-based order, rules-based order, yeah? Well, who's told us what the rules are, and whose rules are they?
Yes, exactly. Exactly. It's something that we've all talked about for the past decade or so, or maybe more. You know, this is the new world order, is what people call it, and Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030, and all of this United Nations. Open borders, mass immigration, and the countries must take what the United Nations tell them to take in the way of immigration. So there's none of this closed borders. There's none of this immigration control at all in any of this, because the United Nations is saying that, there must be this immigration, and you will have to take the amount of immigrants we say you have to take above everybody else, above any national laws or anything. This is international law.
Yeah.
You have
any countries that got any sense of nationalism whatsoever, they will flood with immigrants to weaken that nationalism down.
Yes, yeah, and I think the immigration was the big voting thing about the whole referendum. If my memory serves me right, most people on the top of the list was immigration, uncontrolled mass immigration, and this Brexit deal is not going to deliver a stop to that. I don't see it. No matter how they sugarcoat, and they try to sugarcoat, the fact of the matter is Northern Ireland is either part of the Union or they're not anymore. If they're not part of the Union, then they'd best skip with their southern colleagues and join the EU and be part of the EU. Yeah. If that's the case, then there's no problem about borders in Northern Ireland, soft, hard, or whichever. So I think it should be the Northern Irish people should decide whether they want to leave the Union or not. I think that's how that gets resolved, personally. That would make more common sense to me. Of course, a lot of people wouldn't like that, but, that's how it should be.
But what really gets me on the whole of this matter, we are not in the EU. We never joined the EU. The people was never given a vote to join the EU. We was only given a vote, and I remember it clearly because it was my first time I could ever vote, because my age was just right then. Yeah. And it was to join the common market for trade only.
That's right. And Ted Heath lied to us, of course, and said that there'd be no loss of national sovereignty. It was a complete and utter lie. I've got a little document here, actually, guys. I don't know whether you want me to read it, but it's about the 40... there's 40 hidden things in the small print of this document. Brexit 40 horrors lurking in the small print of May's document to be ratified on the 25th of November. So that is what, a mere 1 week away. Is that right?
Sunday, next Sunday.
Yeah. So if you want me to read the full article,
please.
Okay, here we go. This week, Theresa May's government teetered on the point of collapse over a proposed Brexit deal. The withdrawal agreement between the UK and Brussels led to Dominic Raab and Esther McVeigh resigning in protest. However, May's remaining ministers have since attempted to rally around her, at least in the short term. Speaking on Friday, Liam Fox, the International Trade Secretary, gave a speech in which he declared a deal is better than no deal. This is rather different to May's old claim that no deal is better than a bad deal. So is Fox right? Mr. S thought it best to let readers decide for themselves. In theory, Britain is leaving the EU on the 29th of March 2019. But the legal small print published by Brussels shows what this means. Parliament will be asked to ratify a deal which clearly admits that all references to member states and competent authorities of member states shall be read as including the United Kingdom, Article 7. So the UK will be bound by EU law, at least during a transition period. But this transition period can be made to last forever, Article 132. And even if a successor deal is agreed, the UK will have signed away other rights for years to come. Just in case readers don't have the time to go through the lengthy document themselves, Steer Pike has compiled a list of the top 40 horrors lurking in the small print of Theresa May's Brexit deal. In summary, the supposed transition period could last forever. Article 132. The transition period does not end on the 31st of December 2020. Instead, the date is blank, confined to this century, December 20XX, whatever that. So that could be 2099 for all we know.
Yeah.
So what we in fact get is transition of indefinite duration, extension indefinitely by however many years we are willing to pay for, plus all of those extra years from the plus 8 years articles. Should it end within 2 years, as May hopes, the UK has now signed up to clauses keeping us under certain rules for 8 years. If we default on transition, we go into the backstop with the customs union, and realistically, the single market, we can only leave the transition positively with a deal, but we sign away the money. So the EU has no need to give us a deal, and certainly no need to make the one they offered better than the backstop. The European Court of Justice remains sovereign, as repeatedly stipulated. We have surrendered the rights we would have under international law to unilaterally walk away. What follows relates in most part from what is referred to as the transition period, but the language is consistent with the EU, imagining that this will be the final deal. The top 40 horrors. From the outset, we should note that this is an EU text, not a UK or international text. This has one source. The Brexit agreement is written in Brussels. May says her deal means the UK leaves the EU next March. The withdrawal agreement makes a mockery of this. All references to member states and competent authorities of member states shall be read as including the United Kingdom, Article 6. Not quite what most people understand by Brexit.
No.
It goes on to spell out that the UK will be in the UK, but without any MEPs, a commissioner, or ECJ judges. We are effectively a member state, but we are excused, or more accurately, excluded from attending summits. Article 7. That means we'll have no say over anything if that happens. The European Court of Justice has agreed to be our high court. Article 86. Both citizens and resident companies can use it. The UK will remain under the jurisdiction of the ECJ until 8 years after the end of the transition period. Article 158. The UK, I'm not sure. I'm struggling a bit with my glasses here to see the small print because it's all very small. The UK will still be bound by any future changes to EU law in which it will have no say, not to mention having to comply with current law, Article 6, Section 2. Any disputes under the agreement will be decided by EU law only, perhaps the most dangerous provision of all, Article 168. Arbitration will be governed by the existing procedural rules of the EU law. This is not arbitration as we would commonly understand it, i.e. between two independent parties, Article 174. Underlining that this agreement is founded on an overall balance of benefits, rights and obligations for the Union and the United Kingdom. No, it should be based upon the binding legal obligations upon the EU contained within Article 50. If it is wrong to suggest otherwise. The tampon tax clause, we obey EU laws on VAT with no chance of losing the tampon tax, even if we agree a better deal in December 2020, because we hereby agree to obey other EU VAT rules for 5 years after the transition period. Current EU rules prohibit zero-rated VAT on products like tampons that did not have such exemptions before the country joined the EU. Problems with the EU's definition. 3.1. Union law is too widely defined. United Kingdom national. We should not have agreed the Lisbon Treaty definition, that is, giving away our right to define our citizens. Definitions needed to include the term goods and the term services. We are promised the deal will mean only EU law in relation to goods will apply. This is not defined. This is a non-defined term so far. This agreement also fails to define it. The Mandelson pension clause. The UK must promise never to tax former EU officials based here, such as Peter Mandelson or Neil Kinnock, on their pensions or tax any current ones on their salaries, or tax any current ones on their salaries. The EU and its employees are immune to our tax laws, Article 104. The UK agrees not to prosecute EU employees who are or who might be deemed in future criminals, Act 101. The pre-existing right of EU citizens are to be extended to citizens of Iceland, Liechtenstein, Norway and Switzerland. They will be pleased. Article 33. The EU's stupidest law ever, the General Data Protection Regulation, is to be banged into UK law. Article 71 to 73. So much for escaping this madness. The UK is obliged to establish a joint committee with EU representatives to guarantee the implementation and application of this agreement. This does not sound like a withdrawal agreement. Why does it need to be subject to continued monitoring? Article 164. The joint committee will have subcommittees with jurisdiction over A, citizens' rights, B, other separation provisions, C, Ireland, Northern Ireland, D, sovereign base areas in Cyprus, E, Gibraltar, and F, financial provisions, Article 165. The agreement will last as long as the country's youngest baby lives. The persons covered by this part shall enjoy the rights provided for in the relevant titles of this part for their lifetime, Article 39. The UK is shut out of all EU networks and databases for security, yet no such provision exists to shut the EU out of ours, Article 8. The UK will tied to EU, it should be will be tied to EU foreign policy, bound by the obligations stemming from the international agreements concluded by the Union and unable to influence such decisions, Article 124. All EU citizens must be given permanent right of residence after 5 years, but what counts as residence? This will be decided by the EU rather than the UK rule, Articles 15 to 16. Britain is granted the power to send a civil servant to Brussels to watch them pass stupid laws which will hurt our economy, Article 34. The UK agrees to spend taxpayers' money telling everyone how wonderful the agreement is, Article 37. Article 40 defines goods. It seems to include services and agriculture, where we may come to discover that actually goods means everything. Article 40 to 49 practically mandate the UK's ongoing membership of the customs union in all but name. The UK will be charged to receive the data information we need in order to comply with EU law, Article 50. The EU will continue to set rules for UK intellectual property, Article 54 to 61. The UK will effectively be banged by a non-disclosure agreement swearing us to secrecy regarding any EU developments. We have paid to be part. This is not mutual. The EU is not banged by such measures, Article 74. The UK is banged by EU rules on procurement laws, which effectively forbids us from seeking better deals elsewhere, Article 75 to 78. We give up all rights to any data the EU made with our money, Article 103. The EU decide capital projects, too broadly defined. The UK is liable to, why on earth can't they say now? Oh yes, I remember, they're bust, Article 144. The UK is banged by EU state aid laws until future agreement. Even in the event of an agreement, this must wait 4 years to be valid. Article 99. Is it 90? Can't see that. It might be 93. My eyesight's terrible. Excuse me. Similar advantages and immunities are extended to all former MEP or EU officials more generally.
Right, Geoff.
Who's that? Who's that?
Hey, it's Olly.
Oh, hi, Ollie. I'm just finishing off reading this a minute, Ollie. 1 second, mate. If you could do that while I'm doing it, because we're getting a bit of feedback here.
Of course.
I thought you fell off the chair, off your perch for a minute.
You are. I'll just finish off this. The UK is forbidden.
Oh, you're ready for aliens.
Yeah, Triffids.
The UK is forbidden from revealing anything the EU told us or tells us about the finer points of deal and its operation, Article 105. Any powers the UK Parliament might have had to mitigate EU law are officially removed, Article 128. The UK shall be liable for any outstanding commitments after 2022, Article 142, Section 2, expressly mentions pensions, which gives you an idea as to who probably negotiated this. The amount owed will be calculated by the EU, Articles 140 to 142. The UK will be liable to future EU lending. As anyone familiar with the EU's financial knows, this is not good, Article 143. The UK will remain liable for capital projects approved by the European Investment Bank, Article 150. The UK will remain a party. What's that? A party, i.e. cough up money for the European Development Fund, Articles 152 to 154. And the EU continues to calculate how much money the UK should pay it. So thank goodness Brussels does not have any accountancy issues. The UK will remain banned.
Still not signed off their accounts from day one that they started.
Aye. The UK will remain banned, i.e. coughing up money to the European Union Emergency Trust Fund, which deals with irregular migration, i.e. refugees, and displaced persons heading to Europe, Article 155. The agreement will be policed by the authority, a new UK-based body with powers equivalent to those of the European Commission, Article 159. And of course, the UK will agree to pay 40 billion to receive all of these privileges, Article 138. That's it. That's the end of that article, folks. Well, what does that tell you, basically?
Well, it tells me we're being stymied every which way but loose, literally. No matter which way you turn, we're being hammered.
Absolutely, completely and utterly hammered, I would say.
Yeah, well, we've got a few more come into the room. I think Ollie's there and a few others as well. So,
Hey, Stav.
Hey, Ollie, how's it going? All right?
Good, thank you. Good. I hope everyone's well.
Yeah, well, I can only speak for me. Yeah, same as I say, but I hope you're okay over there and everything, yeah?
Yeah, mate. I'll tell you what, we've had some floods. We have had some floods, but yeah, no, everything's fine and what have you. You know, we need a flood of democracy, don't we? That's what we need. We need a flood of democracy, and we really are seeing. I just went for a walk now to clear my head, and I was thinking, you know, we are losing our country here. If we lose our democracy, then the country has no meaning. The nation, the state has no meaning, nothing to offer us anymore. It's so incredibly dangerous, the game they're playing. What they wanted all along, the reason that May was put in there, a Bilderberger for crying out loud, was to, as you said, Stav, to stymie the whole, to stymie the whole process, prevaricate, obfuscate, procrastinate, put the whole bloody thing, kick the whole thing down the road until such time as they could fudge it that we remain. And as it turns out, we see now with those points, that 40-point plan of neglect that PJ the Geoff just went through from the Spectator, It outlines absolutely. We see there clear as day that we're not just leaving we're not leaving the EU at all. We're going to be in exactly the same situation, except with no say whatsoever at the table. None. No MEPs, no veto, no veto. They're taking over our military, and they will decide and can decide under the terms of that agreement what we pay each year for the privilege of, as Boris Johnson has correctly said, becoming a vassal state. It's absolutely disgraceful. Absolute disgrace. It's tyranny, it's treason, and any member of the cabinet that doesn't resign over this is a traitor. There's no question about it. As for May, I don't know whether she's been blackmailed. I don't know whether her husband's a pervert and they've got something on her. I don't know what the reason is, but she is either being blackmailed or she's mad or she's a traitor or psychopathic, or possibly all of the above. This is not democracy, and we must not let it stand.
No. Well, Ollie, it makes you wonder if they could have done any of this, if they succeed in destroying England, the UK, the Union, everything. If they succeed, it makes you think they could never have done this without that bloody referendum 2 years ago. That maybe it was all set up for this. You know, maybe the referendum was the secret agenda to push the whole complete super state of the EU, including the EU.
Only if they wanted to create order out of chaos, which, yes, order ab chaos is a possibility. Maybe they did. But I don't think that they expected the result to go the way it did. I don't think that they did.
No, that's fair enough. And I've just always thought that, you know, somebody who would... sorry, I've got fireworks going on here. Somebody who could turn all of a sudden after all these years and offer up a referendum on an election pledge and actually bring it forward, and then bim bam wallop, you know, it goes through, he resigns, May comes in, and it seems so well orchestrated to me that it couldn't be, you know, it could possibly be like you say, they didn't expect the result that they got. Maybe it was even bigger and they fudged it to be only 52.
Well, I think they didn't get the result they wanted. As soon as they didn't get the result they wanted, they moved on to plan B. They had everything in place to go straight into action.
Yes, it's all orchestrated, I feel, but, you know, I could be wrong. But at the end of the day, we can see it for what it really is now, surely. And listen, I don't get the stupidity of people that vote to remain because they say they have a democratic right and they're only exercising that. There's nothing more undemocratic than a bunch of unelected European bureaucrats. That's not democracy. So I question the sanity of these people.
Well, they're conditioned, aren't they? They're conditioned. All of their, you know, trendy college professors love the EU. And, you know, they all get, I don't know, goodness knows what, little jollies and stuff like that. But the fact is that
you don't understand
this whole common purpose thing that's gone the whole way through the established, the public sector.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's like I say, I'm kind of a political atheist, and I guess what I say it doesn't have any weight whatsoever, really. But I'm entitled to my views, and I will express them. But I still think the whole thing has been orchestrated. But that's just me, and I think the Brexit was orchestrated. The referendum was orchestrated. It was all put in place. It's all gone like clockwork for them, and I don't know what the answer is to it. How it's going to resolve? It just looks like the British public, through voting, have really voted themselves into a...
I don't think so. The British public, they were given a binary choice and they took their choice. It was engineered. Maybe it was. What we do know was engineered have been all of the treaties and the referendum, the original referendum in 1975. We know through reading the FCO 301048 from 1970, we know that they knew that they would be ceding all of our sovereignty over a period of time, that it would get to this stage where we have bugger all sovereignty left. They knew that in 1970. Ted Heath didn't level with the country, quite possibly because he was being blackmailed for being a paedophile. If what Mr. Veal, the top cop of Wiltshire, said is correct, then, you know, I mean, and we know off the back of that, all the Maastricht all the way through to Lisbon, and how the whole lot's been engineered and second referendums conjured up and goodness knows what. We know that they have engineered this EU imperialist state, and that they want it. And we see from the fact that this wretched Conservative Party brought in a remoron to enact the will of the so-called enacting the will of the British people. We know how cynical a move that was at the time, if we had any wit. And clearly now, from what's transpired, that's been proven. So yes, there's no question. There is no question. Donald Trump calls it the deep state. Very often we call it the New World Order. You know, people like Soros, whatever. We know that these people, they basically want cheap labor, and they will not allow us to control their profit margin so that we can have a better way of life and look after our culture. And that's what we're fighting for. And we are fighting fascism. That's what we're fighting. We're fighting fascism. And at the moment, they haven't got the jackboots, but they will have the jackboots. And that's the EU army, for example, that's going on. And guess what? The British press, they never talk about that, do they? They barely even talk about that.
Ollie, before you came on, Ollie, I did mention that this is all part of a bigger agenda, which is the United Nations wants a one-world government by 2030. Yeah. The EU is effectively already sort of more or less joined with Africa. One cornerstone, which is what Jacques Delors boasted it was, a cornerstone to global government. And Jean-Claude Trichet, both Bilderbergers. Yeah, and the EU was already sort of more or less aligned and joined with Africa. That's one state linchpin. And then you'll have the Americas Union, which is what I think got planned, which is Mexico, America, and Canada.
Which was supposed to be off the back of NAFTA, but obviously Trump's put his boot into that. Yeah.
Well,
but the TTIP and that is still all going through under a different name, exactly the same circumstances it would have been under TTIP, except under a different name.
We need to crash out. Ollie, we need to crash out. Get Smoggy in. He's the only bloke who speaks the truth. He can't tell a lie. The man needs to be at the helm. Let's crash out. Build our own economy.
It wouldn't be crashing anyway, would it? I agree with you. I completely agree with you. We should just leave under WTOs and trade on those terms.
Listen, guys, this is the important thing, what I'm going to say now. The UK is the linchpin. It's the linchpin in the grenade, right? If we don't get out, basically, we're done for. We're going to be a slave state. We're going to be a state in vassalage, and the whole world will end up in this one world government situation.
I have a question.
By next Sunday, we've got to make our minds up, because I was listening to a hard talk on RT the other night, and they reckon there'll be a humongous inflationary recession 4 months after we've March the 29th, and it's fixed to we'll be dragged down with Europe.
Yeah.
We basically got to next Sunday.
We've got enough debt of our own, but Europe, they're going to swallow us all up, and it's going to be probably close to what the Germans went through in the early 19th century. Would I be? I hope not.
I have a question.
Yeah, okay, the chap is in. I don't know what your name is. It doesn't tell you in Jitster. You got a question? Go
John.
ahead. Sorry?
My name's John. I thought you guys already left the European Union.
Oh, yeah. Hiya, John. Yes. Well, no. So
No.
It sounds like it.
there we are. We've never lawfully entered the EU because we were taken in under false pretenses as
So what was Brexit then?
the Brexit, the referendum.
It was make-believe of leaving. It was the make-believe that we was in the EU, but we've never been in the EU.
We're not allowed to be a part of the EU. Alfred the Great's common law.
Uh-huh.
I'm afraid
You
our.
cannot usurp it. You cannot usurp it.
I'm
I
afraid
accept it.
they
John,
have- is what
John.
they-
Well, that cleared everything up.
They've
This must
got
be-
our
this must be-
constitution.
There's a
within-
lot of things. There's a lot of factors involved in this answer,
Okay.
and as these guys are correctly saying, we do have laws, ancient and not so ancient, that protect our rights. We cut off a king's head to safeguard some of those rights, and unfortunately, those laws have been curtailed really and broadsided by successive prime ministers.
Totally usurped, didn't they?
Tony Blair.
Same here. Same
And-
here.
yeah, that's right. But we had that vote, didn't we? You said you thought we had Brexit because we had the vote, and we
Right.
did, and it was the biggest turnout in electoral history for any single cause to leave the EU. As they say, because of our constitution, we shouldn't be in the EU legally anyway. But the
Right.
fact is that it's been kind of hoodwinked on us one way and another, and so people were then asked, because we are not inextricably, but we are very, very closely interlinked with the EU one way and another through the treaties that have illegally,
Sure.
probably, been written up and what have you in the name of the British public and other European nation states. But so we were then given, because of this almost inextricable link, if you like, we were given this choice finally. Because the government was under threat from, if you like, populists, I think just people. So they gave us the choice. And yes, the biggest turnout for any single cause said we want to be out of the EU, to leave it. And
Right.
since then, that was 2 years ago, about 28 months ago or so. And since then, the government has done nothing but try and prevent that. And that's where we are. And so we're questioning, we thought we were supposed to be like the cradle of democracy and all this. It's just, when people are learning the
Propaganda.
reality of the political classes in the UK, exactly the same as you guys have in the States.
See, technically, what happened, guys, is this: we had 6 EU treaties, right? And what happened was they basically rolled the whole treaties all together and subsumed our constitution, what was left of our constitution, into the Lisbon Treaty. So technically, our country was abolished in 2009, if I'm not mistaken. That's when the Lisbon Treaty was signed off by Gordon Brown and the Queen. And from that point onward, technically, we've been effectively emasculated and abolished as a nation. Then they brought out in November 2015 QMV, Quality Majority Voting, which transferred the remainders, virtually all the remainders of any important powers we had left into the European Union. And thus, we're already technically a vassal state with basically a shit show in Westminster that happens on a Wednesday afternoon, which is Prime Minister's question time. The rest of the week, Parliament is empty, virtually. There's usually a handful of people in the House of Commons, like I said, apart from Wednesday afternoon when they have Prime Minister question time. And it's just all theatre. That's all that we've got left.
Or
So-
when they're voting for their own pay rise, and that shows what just a load of greedy buggers we got in there that don't give a jot about our country or about our people.
Oh, I'll tell you what, Paul. When they vote for their own pay rise, the Houses of Commons are full. Anything
Yes,
else,
they do.
anything else important is bloody empty. This is the thing that's going on. I don't think people realise that we've just got a bunch of traitors in there. Basically, all taken out and hanging, a lot of them.
Hold on. Oh, sorry.
The problem is
That's
a
bloody
no trust
Express.
fund.
Hold on.
I mean, we were
Sorry. Carry on.
So basically, we've got about a week before this is signed off, this agreement. And also, we've got PESCO, which is going to be, I think, ratified on December the 14th, if it hasn't already been signed off.
And the key words in that PESCO is permanent structured. Permanent structured. That's the key word in PESCO. Because the co is cooperation. But so it says it all. Permanent structured. Which structured by the EU.
Exactly. So all these EU treaties have been rolled up into the Lisbon Treaty, which has sort of taken our constitution into the Lisbon Treaty sort of thing. What's left of our constitution anyway, because I think there's only 3 articles in the whole thing that was left, to be honest. We've got nothing left. We're in vassalage now already. And this thing which we had, which was the vote on on June the 23rd, 2016, is just basically, I don't think there was ever intentions. There was never any intentions for us to leave the EU. I think they've known it all along. Theresa May's known it all along. It took her 9 months after the vote to actually trigger Article 50. That could have been done the very next day. But no, she kept it. That should have been enough of a signal to us.
It should have been Article 50. It should have been the 1972 Act.
Yeah, well, basically, that should have been on its own. That should have been enough knowledge for us to know that we are not leaving the EU, and they never had any intentions of us leaving the EU.
Well, I'm sorry to say, guys, we're like a guy in a harem with his dick cut off.
Yeah, one world government, and they want it by 2030. They don't like the fact that timescales have slipped anyway with regards to consolidating the EU. That took many more years than they had hoped that it was going to take.
On the side.
On the side, come alive.
Oh, it works. Thank you. Carry on.
Hello, Marty. Have you got anything to say about the EU and all that?
I've got a lot to say about treason, especially the one called May. She should be gallowed, basically, hung, drawn and quartered. But then again, every politician since we joined the EU, since, 72? We should need to get rid of them all, because they're all traitors. Everyone who's sat in that building since we signed up to there, as far as I'm concerned, they're a traitor.
I think any of the ones in the cabinet that didn't go against this draft agreement technically are traitors.
Exactly, because they facilitated it.
Just as all of those that stood by and allowed Iraq to happen, I'm not saying they're traitors, but they should certainly be tried for treason.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I agree with that.
All those that don't stand up against something that is totally wrong, they're facilitators.
Yes. That's right.
I mean, basically, the
cabinet level, is that forgivable?
Well, the Tory party's been sacrificed over this. The Tory party will no longer, because nobody will ever trust them again.
But they don't have any purpose after this. When you have further integration of Europe, when you've given away your military and you haven't got any nation state left, the local politics become redundant. Party politics are pretty much irrelevant. It's all controlled by a few unelected technocrats that tell the European Parliament what to vote on.
Yes.
Funny you should say that, because it's funny you should say that, because I don't know if you've heard of David Noakes when he did his talk about a few years ago. He said that he felt that once they've consolidated their power in the EU, that they would basically shut Westminster down completely.
That's what's happening.
That's right.
Turn it into a bloody hospital.
You give them the money to refer Parliament.
Go on, sorry.
Yeah, they said he said that they probably shut down Westminster and turn it into a hospital or something like that. So that would not surprise me in the least. He's been right on everything else. He's been right on.
So it'll be a
what do you expect? Just very quickly, forgivable. How do you forgive tyrants that rule by arbitrary powers. And that's what the British government has been for a long time. There is no law when they dish out arbitrary powers, and that's what it is. And the EU is a Napoleon, just kicking on from Napoleonic law, and that's to rule by arbitrary. That is what it is.
It is technically Napoleonic law that we're now under, because they basically scrapped habeas corpus and replaced it with corpus juris. So you're no longer proven guilty. You're now guilty unless you can prove you're innocent.
We're now under Napoleonic law. End of story.
Yes, that's it. So why should anybody? I mean, should we forgive Napoleon?
That's it, isn't it? Well, we wouldn't forgive Napoleon.
And these unelected bureaucrats are just the same, and even our own government. I'm not even going to call it my own because
Yeah, that's right. It isn't.
You can't actually accuse them of treason when they're nothing to do with constitutional common law, or whichever you want to do, because they rule by the legal arbitrary system. You see?
And of course, the other thing.
So how do you deal with them? Why should you forget them?
Stake them undrawn and quartered.
What people forget is that these people are Bilderbergs. Now, what is a Bilderberg? A Bilderberg is someone who represents the European Union. And the purpose of the Bilderberg group is to build the European federal superstate, right? So they don't represent us. They never have done since Ted Heath. They've never represented us. So
they never will do.
People have said, well, why are they ignoring the will of the people over this and over that, like the Iraq war and everything else? Because they do not represent us. They never have done since the time of Ted Heath. They represent the European Union. Every prime minister that looks, or anybody who looks like he's going to become prime minister, has to agree to become a Bilderberg, or they won't get to be prime minister. It's rigged. It's a stacked deck of cards. I've been telling people about it for years. It's a stacked
selection, not an election.
Selection, yes, Marty, exactly, mate. It's a selection, not an election. That's exactly what it is. And everybody elected has to be signed up to be a Bilderberg and to represent the European Union and the interests of more harmonisation, more integration, and more consolidation of EU powers. That's exactly what it's been about right from the word go.
This is why, Geoff. This is why I say, and I've brought it up time and time again. And I don't care who they are, who they think they are, or who they think they represent. Any political party, when you hit them with a lawful, legal manifesto tied to the voter, they all shun it. Everyone, even UKIP. Because they don't want no reverse liability.
They're all friends of Israel.
They will be held accountable for their actions.
No, exactly.
They're all friends of Israel. How can they be held accountable for their actions? They're all serving the chosen people.
Well, yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So, you'll never get true democracy ever unless they're willing to, unless there is a reciprocal deal. Unless there's a reciprocal deal between the people and the ruler and the people. There was that long time ago in history, but you got to go back 1,000 years for that. But I digress. I urge people to read.
I can tie a reciprocal noose.
Well, yeah. Well, there's got to be an each way deal with the people and the ruler. Unless you've got that type of reverse liability given each way, you'll never get any form of democracy. That's why they say, well, it's the best of a bad bunch.
Oh, wait.
The lesser of two evils is still evil, though, isn't it?
It's completely
Absolutely.
It's the illusion of democracy. That's all.
I'm still waiting for that party to come along and say, yes, we will sign a lawful contract with bound to our manifesto with the voters who vote for us, so that if we do not carry out our promises or don't achieve our promises, you can lawfully chuck us out. I've
Yeah,
still
they're-
not met a party to do that.
There needs to be some sort of checks and balances, and that would be a very good check and balance, Stav, to be honest. They all need to sign a contract so that they live up to their party manifesto and, like you said, stand by their election promises. If they fail, if they renege on their promises, then they're out.
Yeah.
Like you said,
I've got some good checks and balances for you then, Geoff. The first checks and balances we need outside Parliament is some stocks. First offence, they spend a day in the stocks. Next to the stocks, the second check and balance we need is a set of gallows. Second offence, bump.
it's funny you
Job
should say
done.
that, actually, because I was just going to say, you know, we're going to need some chippies up in 10 Downing Street because Mrs. May's going to need a new cabinet. While we're up there, we might as well build some bloody gallows and get the ropes up. Just as a friendly reminder to them who it is they're supposed to be serving.
In David.
Right. So what happened then?
I have no confidence in you, Marty.
The bottom line is that they need 15% of it's a party issue whether or not they change the leader, because we have a parliamentary democracy, and as such, whoever is in power gets to choose the leader. We choose the party or the coalition effectively, and then they choose the leader between whoever's in Parliament between that group. And in this case, it's the Tories, and I guess the DUP could have a bit of a say in it, but they're only behind the scenes. The people that get the votes are the Tory MPs, and they need 15% of them to hand in letters to the 1922 committee, to what's his name, Brady or whatever, and he, when he gets those 15%, that equates to 48 letters calling for a vote of no confidence on the prime minister, and then a leadership election basically for the Tory party, and then he said apparently he's been telling people that when he gets those, he would give everybody 48 hours notice that he was going to announce a contest. I don't know whether that's right or wrong, or whether that's the traditional way, or whether they're playing around with it to try and give May notice or what. But that's what apparently he said. And so it may be that he did get his 48 letters the other day, and that we'll hear the announcement tomorrow. That is a possibility.
Ollie,
Yeah,
there's another option as well, Ollie. If they don't get the 48 letters, that leaves us virtually only one thing left, and that's Arlene from the DUP. She could dissolve the Tory government completely because she's a coalition partner of the Tories. So
well, she would probably vote against what have you, but this government, this prime minister, could potentially hang on through May. But the bottom line, March. But the bottom line, though, is that they will get an extension to Article 50. If she stays, if she's not deposed, if we don't get a Brexiteer, a patriot in charge, then she will, and this wretched Westminster lot will extend Article 50 by hook or by crook, and basically do what she's done, except that it's, there will be a kind of an extension of, I don't know, a year or something. And the whole thing is kicked down the road. And in the meantime, there's this possibility of a Labour government, and then the Blairites getting power over it, kicking out Corbyn, calling him an anti-Semite or whatever, and getting their power, and then completely scuttling the whole thing, probably bringing in votes for 16-year-olds, so that we've got a bunch of, frankly, ignoramuses voting on the subject as well, people who've got no experience in life. And that's what's going on. That's what's going on. They're basically kicking it down the road until they can, as you said, I think, Stav, engineer.
Yeah.
Keep engineering this.
Can they still invoke the 1972 Act?
Well, yes. Why not? But nobody's talking about. They're not talking about any of that, are they? Because they don't want to do it. They are.
This is where people have got to get the message out to other people. What can be done.
Hang on a second. They tied up the 1970. They actually signed the 1972 Communities Act, and they put that into the withdrawal agreement going back quite a while ago, actually. So that's already been signed. But the point is that I was making, Ollie.
He's talking about repealing it, though, isn't he? The ECA.
Act, the Great Repeal Act, whatever they did. But what I was going to say was, even if all that failed, it still hinges on Arlene because there's a coalition government. It's not just the Tories; it's the Tories and the DUP. So if Arlene decided to finish the coalition with the Tory party, she could literally force a snap election. But then you would probably end up with a Corbyn government, Labour government. So I don't know where Corbyn stands on Brexit or what he would be like, but that is a possibility. She could literally dissolve that government and force a snap election because nobody would vote for Tories again after all this. You can pretty much guarantee that
they've slipped about 7 points in the polls over the course of the last couple of weeks, but judging by just, I think, one poll. I mean, I don't trust polls, but there's no question that people are, really, really very unlikely to vote Tory if it's now. But if we vote Labour, we've got exactly the same problem. They're even more confused.
Yeah, well, the Labour are the Tories, I'm afraid. They've been the Tories ever since Blair come along.
That's right. They're all, that's right.
All Bilderberg run anyway. Now, whether Bilderberg, I don't know. But, like I said, so basically you've got either this vote of no confidence goes through, or Arlene could dissolve the government and force a snap election. So that's the two options that I see. I can't see any other options for stopping.
The rebels want to crash out, so that's the difficult thing about it. the Leavers, that's all they've got, really. I mean, we run the referendum, but it looks like we're left with rebels to crash us out, which is not going to happen, is it?
I would still like to see some type of, even if Rees-Mogg succeeded with the rest of the backbench rebels or whatever, I would still like to see if one of those took the helm of the Tory party. I would still like to see
that's going to happen. I don't know.
Yeah, but I would still like to see some type of accountability and reverse liability in a lawful document with them saying, this is what's going to happen. And if it doesn't happen by March or a short date's time, you can lawfully remove them. Now, I don't trust any of them, and I don't think any British person who's got any sense to trust any of them, of course. But,
I'm afraid I don't trust Mogg either.
No, I'm
Hang
just
on a
saying.
minute.
Yeah, that's right. I'm saying.
Hang on just a minute. Why do we have to, if they're there unlawfully and doing unlawful things, why are we the ones who have to remain lawful? Why don't we just remove them and have done with it?
Yeah, it makes you think, doesn't it? It does make you think.
Yeah,
They're relying on us staying lawful.
You've got, but once you remove them, what are you going to do?
Come on, Olly. Olly.
What are you going to do? What now? If the whole country got together, let's say all the Remainers got together, they blocked the M25, they went hands on activists, and they run the country to a halt, right? And they managed to get rid of, by whatever force, get rid of the treasonous dictators. But then what? What are you going to do then?
Here you go, Stav. Right, if you force them out, you could turn around and say UKIP to UKIP or Gerard Batten or whatever his name is. You could turn around and say, look, we will let you take control of this country and steer us through the Brexit to get us out. But before you do that, we're going to make you sign a contract. If you want to take the power of this country, then you have to sign a contract to agree to remove us completely.
He would never. Hold on a sec. I mean, he's not going to get that kind of support. He might. UKIP may get some seats, and I will be voting UKIP, by the way. No question about it. But that alone would be very useful to have a UKIP presence. It would change the character of the Commons.
What I'm saying, if we ousted the government by force, the people, right? If we ousted them by force, we could then turn around to say, we're going to let you take the reins, UKIP. You can come in, guide us through Brexit, and then when you've finished getting us out of the EU in its entirety, you can then call an election and go back through the proper processes and restore normality. But in order to do so, first, you've got to agree to sign a contract with the people, agreeing that we get a complete...
mate, that is so hypothetical. I need to go. Can I read something, though? Can I read something before I go? Because I think that people really, really need to know how we got to this point and to be utterly incensed by that before we can then decide, well, what are we going to do about it? I think that still not enough people know. Anyway, I don't know if I could quickly read this. It'll be 5 minutes. But
go for it, Ollie, because that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
Look, let me quickly get through this. I think you guys will have a lot of conversation points off the back of this. The hard truth is this: the establishment have done and will do everything in their power to preserve their fiefdom, and it is not in their personal interest to leave this globalist disingenuity, the EU. Where we are today was exactly what we could expect when, rather than reflect the wishes of their constituents, Conservative MPs elected a prime minister that, far from reflecting the majority vision, was someone from the losing Remain camp. This choice was perverse, illustrating candidly just how out of touch is this political class with the electorate it is supposed to serve. And this lack of judgment is set out. Subsequently, this prime minister has not led these negotiations, but has allowed Britain to be bullied by a club we wish to leave on good terms. She may be lauded for taking punches, but what Britain needed, quite obviously, was precisely the kind of take-no-truck tone of negotiation that has been exercised by Michel Barnier and by the EU in general throughout its existence. They are brash and ambitious. We chose polite and weak. even setting aside May's general election fiasco, possibly the worst run campaign in living memory, and which she fought as though she wanted to lose and almost did. These same kamikaze tactics were evident from the very start of the actual talks. You should remember, most pointedly of all, May needlessly conceding the need for parallel talks, instead allowing these 2+ years to be dominated only by divorce talks, or rather rhetorical chicanery, refusing the chance to balance properly the basis for a future relationship, and even creating potentially grave danger for the future of our union. We should have just told them, no, we will talk trade now, together with the withdrawal talks, or we will walk. Let us know. This was logical then, and many argued so. And the difference, in practice, the Irish border issue would have been resolved at the time in a trade doc. As things stood, the government should have refused to discuss the matter. The border issue is, after all, a trade issue. The EU wanted their cake and to eat it, and May was happy to dish out the fudge. In turn, creating the most dangerous aspect of the entire process, the backstop. It is notable how the entire establishment, particularly the media, did not and do not point out the issues I raise here. They create problems when there are none. Chaos has been manufactured, and this has been evident the length and breadth of the media with each and every mainstream paper, magazine, and news show. Trade was and remains the key. Theresa May threw the card away, and everything she has done since has been playing catch-up, not least because by ignoring trade, it was repeatedly been more easily spun by Remain's media that the EU have all the cards, despite its slow train wreck implosion, which again the BBC ignores. Trump card after Trump card has landed on the porch at number 10. They have all been ignored, not just by this government, but also by a cynical media. Trade was and remains the key. Theresa May threw it away, our key card. The fact the EU buys only half as much as it sells to us, the trade deficit. Can anyone recall her even mentioning it? The fact should have been a negotiation headline. It was barely breathed. Instead, a climate has been engineered where everything looks bleak for post-Brexit Britain, or where all the good news, such as that our economy remains healthier than that of the EU, is despite the Leave campaign won the campaign to change fundamentally our country. But an establishment that deigns itself superior to the people stole that win and has systematically crushed it underfoot into the ground. This isn't a cock-up, people. It was planned, cajoled, division sown, the electorate worn down. The effect of the national psyche, one might add, amounts to a kind of water torture. You tell me, are people more or less happy for experiencing this process? Is it right or wrong to toy with people's nerves, lives, families, and culture? There are many interesting questions that arise here about what constitutes abuse from state to population. And now, not one, but 2 Brexit secretaries have resigned, frustrated by a prime minister that sidelined them in favour of having an unelected EU fanboy civil servant lead the talks with Barnier. That alone should be sickening enough to anyone who cares about accountable government. Davis had, 2, maybe 3 meetings with Barnier? He said there simply was no point, that the civil service, politicised by a certain Tony Blair, had been placed in charge. And it is notable that Blair, just this week, last week now, has gleefully praised Robbins for his role in what to you or I surely resembles a disaster. Rob found no different in his petty role. He explained the newly created position of Brexit Secretary, given the times, should have been amongst the most revered in government. Yet its occupant might as well have been Larry the Cat. Our Brexit secretaries were not there for Brexit. They were mere tinsel, appointed by May to fool the public that she was listening to Brexiteers and that they had a role in the future of the country. It was a spiteful, unforgivable deceit. If the Tories were public servants, they would depose and dispose this distraction today and offer us a Brexiteering Prime Minister to say to the EU what should have been said from the start. Talk trade or we walk. But talk trade and we will make a settlement which will help us all. We will leave on the EU on the 29th of March, 11 p.m. GMT. So we will just have to do the best we can, Europe. Do you want to trade? The above was a lot easier to say 2 years ago. We've had our time wasted with scant attention to domestic and other foreign affairs. For all this time, afar from conservative waste of our national opportunity. But we have no choice but to say it, to insist upon a basis of trade talks. Else it's no deal. If we care to safeguard our national interest, and not just in the foreseeable, but more importantly, in the longer term. The question today is, has the judgment of Tory MPs sufficiently improved since May's election? I doubt it very much. Those spectacles such as May's nationally embarrassing mocking in the Commons do seem to be educating a few as to the stakes involved at last. Many Subris need kicking out entirely. Their contempt for those that gave them their power proves that party politics does not work in its current form, that is grossly unrepresentative, that constituents are often colour-blinded, special interests given priority, and so it goes on. I expect to see them engineer an extension to Article 50. I see no Brexit thereafter, unless somehow we fluke no deal. Estimations would change, given a different leader. Eliminating the prospect of another fraud like Rudd, estimations would improve. That's been the path of the last 2 years, and that's where it has brought us, which is practically nowhere. And that has been the plan from the very day Theresa May threw her hat into the leadership ring. She is indeed a traitor, and she is far from being the boss. That's it, gentlemen.
Yeah, very good, very good. Well, yes, but you are pretty much there in there, Olly. So yeah, nice piece. I hope it goes out to whoever you want to reach, and basically.
I mean, I put it in the heart of British politics, and
yeah, why not? Because these things need to be said, and they need to be heard. Even though we're censored to pieces nowadays.
Tell you what, that has had such a response. That piece, it's had more of a response than pretty much anything else I've done, written on Facebook and stuff like that. But the truth is that we're singing to the choir. We're singing to the choir, and we're really just hoping for the best from, a bunch of more of the same in the same Westminster club. And I too think I have a lot of time for example, Jacob Rees-Mogg. I don't trust Boris. Look at Gove, for God's sake. I mean, he was supposed to be, putting the. It's just an absolute travesty of justice that we're just hoping for the best, and that's almost the best we can do.
Recite that for Nigel, Olly.
Nigel Farage. Well, he's not. He
said he's going to get back on the campaign if it all goes banana. He's clapping and rubbing his hand. He's going to start.
Well, yeah, but it's a very poignant thing that Olly mentions in what he wrote there, and I'll let Olly get going. But there's a reason, and people should do their own research, do their own diligence, and there's a reason why all the senior civil servants get paid more money than the Prime Minister. I say no more.
Well,
it is a very important point that the civil service has become politicized. That's a very, very key factor in this whole thing. The reason that we're not prepared to come out on WTO terms is purely down to the civil service not doing their job because they don't want to leave.
Well, the civil service have been common purpose indoctrinated.
Well, don't forget, Paul, when you say they're indoctrinated, it's kind of forgiving them for being led astray. It kind of doesn't sit well with me. They are linchpins. They are linchpins. They're heavily invested. These people are worth billions of pounds. They have corporate investments far exceed a lot of the politicians, even after they retire and get their lordship place. These top civil servants are incredibly rich people.
Aye. Well, look, guys, I'm going to go, but God bless you, and keep talking. Let's keep talking.
Input, Ray. That was very eye-opening to a lot of people, I bet.
It's the deep state, Ollie. It's very deep, it's very big, and it's very extensive.
It is. Yeah, it is. The truth is, we'll probably not defeat it, yeah? But on the other, really, that's how I feel in my heart sort of thing. But on the other hand, I honestly also think, well, you know what? I mean, it seems to me that there's not really anything more important to do in life than to try and do that. So let's have a go.
You got to keep fighting, Ollie, haven't you? At the end of the day, you know?
I think so.
At the end of the day,
I'll tell you what. I meet some wicked people in the process. I'll tell you, it is beautiful hearts.
It's a good ride. It's a good ride. Yeah.
Can I just put out a message there to anybody in the RAF? If you're in the RAF and you have access to some brilliant jet fighters, could you and a bunch of people launch a sortie campaign on the City of London, the square mile that is the City of London? Use bunker busters, use whatever bombs necessary, and flatten the City of London. That square mile den of iniquity of vipers need to be
along with the mosques.
So if you're in the RAF or you know anybody,
where they all are.
Make sure Carney goes west.
Use whatever bombs necessary. Flatten the City of London completely. Raise it to the bloody ground.
And get the remembrance out of Parliament.
Hey, what was that, Paul?
Get the remembrance out of Parliament.
Oh yeah, he's supposed to be he's supposed to be shortly being replaced. He's retiring, I think.
It shouldn't be there at all because it's the City of London's man.
Don't worry about the remembrance. We'll flatten the whole of the City of London, the 1 square mile that is the City of London. Raise it to the bloody ground as a message to the globe. And a message to the United Nations that we will not capitulate. We will not stand for this.
Lock the door to Westminster and let out Ebola.
Well, listen, you know, you can get rid of the remembrance, but the Lord Mayor, the alderman, which is Anglo-Saxon, right? And I dropped that in because it's a bit of a conundrum. But listen, people should read the Magna Carta and read it carefully. That's my advice to them, because what they think it is ain't necessarily what it is. So, you know, history is very important. And when you know about what the alderman is and what is all about, and the signing of the Magna Carta at Runnymede, you know, 24 to 25 barons were Normans. The king was Normans. It's a Norman charter, guys. Don't forget, that's not an English charter. It's not an Englishman's charter. But anyway, I digress. So I think further research is needed if you want to get to the truth. And there's always plenty of research to be done. So there we are. I don't know if you want to. I'm going to wrap it up soon. I think. What we've been going. We'll give it another 10 minutes or so, then I think we'll wrap it up. I think we've covered most of what we wanted to tonight. And
can we have a vote across the board as to what the what individuals, a show of hands, or what the future may lie with all our talking?
Well, I think you know. It's if nothing changes, it carries on, doesn't it? You know,
well, it don't stay as it is. When my mother used to say, if things don't change, they stay as they are.
But then,
maybe if we could hold on to what we had, well, everything else is worse, isn't it?
Well, you know, dear old mum never thought about agendas, did she? But there you go. It's yeah. Well, what you want to take a stab at what you think's going to happen? What, in March or before March or not at all? An extension to the Article 50, like Olly's saying, never ending.
They say a week in politics is a long time. I think it's a day in politics is a long time.
Well, put it this way, I would not want to be a politician, no. No, I'm a political atheist. I should stay that way until I'm...
But to all those listeners that are not that are Remainers and think that the EU is democratic, the EU Commission is not democratic whatsoever.
No.
They rule the roost.
They're unelected bureaucrats. They're dictators. They run the roost like Napoleon did many years ago, and they use arbitrary powers, which is Napoleonic law. And actually, in fact, that's what you have here. And you've had it quite a long time, but people just haven't realised it, Paul.
So if we stay in the EU, you will become a slave under a dictator. No two ways about it. I'm not being stupid. It's the way things go under dictatorships.
Dimmies in the end.
I think what it does is it opens the door to even more slave masters. They're not just one. You will have more slave masters.
Yeah, jihadism. Imams.
That's another thing, but you know that's part and parcel of the EU agenda with Barcelona and Marrakesh agreements. If anybody,
I just wanted to get up to all those Remainers that thought EU is a good thing. It's not a good thing being under dictatorship because sooner or later you're looking down the barrel of a gun.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Shut up. Let's be shot.
Yes, that's what they intend. If they get away with it, they'll get away with it. But it needs people to do things. At least speak about these things. Let people know how you feel. Exercise your right of freedom of speech, no matter what price. No matter what price.
Doesn't talk much on Facebook these days. I mean, Olly popped in there, but I didn't know what his position.
I don't know what shows Olly's planning to do in the future, if any at all. I know he does his own thing, like we all do. Perhaps you can send him a message on Facebook or ask him if he's intended.
Did you invite him in tonight, or did he just pop along and actually popped in for us? Just thought maybe on Sundays that you think.
PJ gets in touch with everybody that's a member of Axiom, and obviously he lets them all know that we're doing an Axiom Flux show, open mic tonight about Theresa May and will she survive, and also the Brexit and what we talked about. So he would have got one of those messages, and he's glad for his company. The more the merrier. That's how it should be. No, we haven't. Is that part of the EU white paper?
Oh dear.
This is something we were discussing. Was it last night or the night before? I can't remember.
Anything to do with this garden tax that you've been on about? It's going to come from Europe, Andy?
No, garden tax is all part and parcel of the socialist government of Corbyn. If to be a socialist government of Corbyn, if it gets in. But yes, garden tax could be astronomical. I've heard rumours on articles that 10% of the value of your property. So I mean that's
what, in one lump or annually?
No, annually.
You're having a laugh.
I'm not, because it's all part of Agenda 21 2030, where there would be no private ownership, freeholders of land in any of this New World Order.
I better sell up and get out, I think.
Oh, I would suggest people think hard. If they own a house or property, they should really think about, even if they're going to try and leave it, regardless of all the penalties that you have to pay in a will for your offspring. I certainly think people should do a bit of research on that side of the thing if they're if they're property owners or freeholders. For sure, Bill. For sure, because if he gets in, then, you know, this is what they want to do under the guise of we're going to tax the elite and their mansions and their estates. Well, anybody knows about the elite system is they don't own jack shit. It's all in trusts and then the beneficiaries anyway. So they're not the owners.
Yeah, it's the ones that's exposed.
Yeah, that's right, Stav. Apparently, they're the rich is what they do. The rich ones is they own nothing and control everything. It's all done through trusts, like you say. It's exactly right. They put it in real estate trusts and personal property trusts and so on and so forth. Everything goes into the trusts.
And they also, just very...
I think that everybody who actually owns something will have it removed under our communist EU, which will be basically the Labour Party. Because they've been talking about taking away all land and putting it into state ownership. And they've been talking also about taking people's properties off of them. So nobody will own anything. The only people that will have anything are people that are controlling it through a trust.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, Geoff. And here's one little extra thing for Bill or anybody who owns their property or freeholders. That if Labour do get in, not only the garden tax or land tax to be precise, is going to be astronomical. They also want, and what they want they get is first refusal on any property for sale, so they can take it back into a social housing scheme for them. So any property that gets put on the market, they must have first refusal. That's in
and they won't pay full market price either, apparently.
No, of course they won't. Of course they won't. Of course they won't. So you can see that, you know, the communistic, socialistic, Marxism side of that. You can see the plan on grabbing the private land.
And the same will only come about with a Labour government, yeah?
Yes. If Corbyn gets in, or if he gets ousted, like Olly says, they wrap him up with some racist, anti-Semite bullshit stuff, whatever. They replace him with somebody else who's a Blairite. You bet your bottom dollar that'll come in. It's not just a Corbyn thing; it's an EU thing. EU, like Geoff said, is quite correct. It's a communistic, socialistic type dictatorship. Yeah. Or Olly argues he calls it fascism, but I mean, you know,
you've got to remember, mate, the bankers are basically who's behind all the UN and the global governance thing and the EU, and they love communism because there's more money to be made for the bankers in communism. That's why they want to get rid of private property ownership and all that stuff, and they want to introduce their communist agenda because it's all for the bankers, don't you know? All for the bankers.
Absolutely. And do you know what? I kind of semi-agree with what Olly said about fascism, but it's also communism. It's a mixture of the whole goddamn lot. Just put it in a pile and corrupt it all to pieces, and they'll take whatever serves them. So you can call it what you like.
Yeah. Absolutely right. They're all working hand in hand together.
Yeah, definitely. And that is the plan. And that is the plan they intend to bring about by hook or by crook.
Yeah.
And if it takes.
Yeah. Well, what we've got coming is what is known as Communitarianism.
Yes.
And that's it, all lumped together.
Communitarianism, that's right, actually, Paul. Yeah, you're just spot on there, mate. The UK will be basically demoted to a little tourist zone, if you like. That's all we will be, a little tourist economy.
And they're all working in unison. That's why the New World Order is correct in its terms of what it means, because the United Nations and all of like the EU and all the rest of this, China, Japan, you know, I'm not behind the Great Firewall of China, and I don't know anybody who is, unfortunately, because, you know, if you leak anything from China, it's more than the Siberian salt mines or the gulags or the Russians used to do. I think it's far more severe. You just ain't seen again. So I don't, you know, it's very hard to get information out of what's really going on in China. You're never going to know. But I think they're all still connected at the hip with this idea of, they call it globalism because it's nice and cuddly and friendly for the liberals and the.
Yeah, well, globalitarianism sounds a lot better than the rest, doesn't it?
Yes, of course. So, you know, this is the plan, and nothing's changed. It's full steam ahead for them. They don't feel that there's any change to their agenda. I think it's going perfectly smoothly. I actually think, like I've said, that the whole Brexit idea was all part and parcel of this. It was engineered. They had to do the referendum to extend the agenda, to take away what little bit of influence, and say that people in through a democratic decision could possibly have.
Well, in retrospect, Andy, it'd been better if we hadn't had the referendum.
Yes, of course, Bill. Absolutely. Absolutely.
To do it to where we are now.
Absolutely, we're worse off with this deal.
We
Yes.
lose our democracy, our sovereignty,
Yes, we lose a lot.
our rights, the whole lot.
Yeah, you've been led.
Yeah, he got people to the same stage with what Blair done over Iraq. People after Iraq business, they said, well, what's the point of demonstrating? 2 million people went down to London and we weren't listened to. So what's the point? Well, this is the same thing all over again.
Yes. Yeah. This is the thing. People think.
They don't represent us.
People think, right, because they have a vote and they have this democracy thing, they're a player. And they're trying to play the player. But you can't play the player. It's impossible to play the player. If they're the house, they're the casino, you can't win.
The house always wins.
Stacked deck of cards. Exactly. It's a stacked deck of
I
cards.
thought you'd come up with that. You know, I thought Jeff would do the courier.
Well, yes, it's true though, isn't it? It's true. No matter which way you look at it, you can flip a coin. You can put it simply. You cannot beat the house. The house makes the rules.
Yeah, but it's as I win, tells you lose.
It's the golden rule, Stav. He who has the gold makes the rules.
That's it. Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, you know, I'm not swayed by any of this shenanigans of the past 2 or 3 years. I feel a little bit sorry for people that have been hoodwinked into thinking they had some kind of democratic influence on marking, even taking a pen. You know, the fact that I know people who took a pen to the ballot box for the referendum because they didn't trust the pencil. I mean, that says it for me. That's
a spoiled vote.
No, it's not. No, it's not. You can use a pen, right? You can use anything you like, right, to mark your X.
Yeah,
That's
not
not
they can erase the pen and remark it in like they can with a pencil.
exactly. Now, anybody who does that, and I commend them for doing that, but there's one thing they're missing. The fact that they've got to do that in the first place shows you how corrupt the whole system is, and that you can't win anyway. So why are you bothering? I say to people, and they go, well, that's easy just to flunk out. You don't want to, you haven't got to say, blah, blah, blah. Well, you haven't got to say anyway, whether you go with a pencil or pen and mark the X.
Yeah, well, I got a load of stick from one of the marshals in the voting office because I walked out with my voting paper.
Well, that's a good thing. I say to people...
And you can't get done for it because that voting paper belongs to you.
Yeah.
And then you messing with a bunch of them, then you can get done. But your own voting paper, you can do with what you wish.
During the polling day, from the moment it opens to the moment it closes, you can register. You can go in there and, you know, register to vote as you do, right? But you don't have to vote. You've got all day. You may change your mind during the day. Then you may not even vote at all, which is your right if you don't wish to. So there's nothing against breaking any laws by walking out, no matter what these idiots actually say. They just know that you know the bloody game, really, and they don't like it.
I think it was Joseph Stalin who said something, I'm paraphrasing here, but it's something like what wins elections is not votes. It's not the amount of votes, it's who counts the votes.
That's right. It's who counts the votes. That's what he did say, yes.
As we know, if it's a proxy vote or a postal vote, they often get, conveniently lost and things like that. So, they can lose hundreds of thousands of votes in certain constituencies where they know the vote is going to go against them and what have you, lose the entire ballot boxes and things like that. This sort of stuff goes on,
Happened to Farage, did it?
Yeah. Why would anybody sign up to a deal if it's only one way and there's no reverse liability in anything? You'd have to be insane.
Absolutely.
You'd have to be insane. Surely.
What the bloody hell did Nigel Farage stand for if he knew he was going to be cooked up?
Because he's a city man. He's a hedge fund manager. He has. Which one?
No, I haven't seen an audio clip at all.
Yeah, 2 hours, wrap it up after that, PJ. I think that's enough. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I'd just like to say thanks to everybody that's come in. It's been an interesting chat, worth doing, and we'll do it again sometime.
Sunday at 7. I said her.
I couldn't go do that job.
Okay. All right, then. Yep. Okay. Cheers. Cheers.
Cheers, everybody. Bye now.
Cheers, everyone.
Cheers, Jeff.
Cheers, Jeff. Cheers, Andy.
It's a European Union that we're told is now to become an empire, a militarised European Union, an undemocratic European Union, a European Union that seeks to continually expand to the east, a European Union that has launched a new Cold War against the United States of America, a European Union that tries to rewrite history. And I think 100 years on from the armistice, we should be genuinely worried. The idea that this new militarised union is somehow a recipe for peace, I suggest you all sit back and think a little bit more carefully. Well, that's how I feel about it. I think it's very dangerous indeed. And let's just remind ourselves. The other thing, Remainers saying, our vision is easy. We know where we're going to be, unlike Leavers. Also, they're now saying that the Leavers lied because Boris put a number on the side of the bus. How about this from Deputy Prime Minister Nick Clegg in 2014 responding to me when I talked about the creation of an EU army?
This is a dangerous fantasy. The idea that there's going to be a European Air Force, a European army, it is simply not true. The problem with people like Nigel Farage is they swing at windmills. They see conspiracies everywhere. I wouldn't be surprised if Nigel Farage soon tells us that the moon landing was a fake, that Barack Obama isn't American, that Elvis isn't dead. It is not going to happen.